Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see the troubles are all the same. You wanna be where everybody knows your name. You wanna go where people know people are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name.
Welcome to another Village in Motion on this November 28th, Tuesday that is, in 2006. I told a resident or a staff member this morning what this program was going to be all about, and they said to me, how come? It's not baseball season. How come you have a baseball program? Well, I said, because I just got around to get to Fred Stein. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you very much. I'm
You
happy to
see,
be here.
I didn't care whether it was baseball season or not. We can maybe have you back sometime.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
But there's a real reason that you're here today, and we're going to build right up to it. But it is because you are an author, right? We'll be showing from time to time the results of your penmanship, which is 3 books.
Labors, please.
Oh, labors of love, he has told me.
Yes, labor of love.
Okay, Fred, let's get acquainted with you. How did you get this interest in baseball? We don't want to skip anything, so let's go right back. Where were you born?
I was born in New York City a few years ago.
Which borough?
The Bronx, and eventually I wound up in Manhattan.
Okay, just had to let you know. I know that New York is made up of boroughs.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I grew up there like every other kid watching baseball. And in those days, that was before World War II, obviously, the only real sport was baseball. They had a little hockey in the off-season. Football was just coming on a professional level, basketball. But baseball not only was the big thing in the summer, warm weather, but they had what they call the hot stove league.
The what?
Hot stove league, meaning you had the theoretical picture of a bunch of guys in the wintertime in this country store with a hot stove discussing what guy we should get for this ball club if we trade this guy.
Oh,
That's the derivation of the term.
You didn't tell me about that. Hot stove.
Well, you have conjure up the picture of these guys around this hot stove in a rural area discussing who we should trade.
How about? But that was the winter part of.
Right.
Okay.
But I'm saying now they don't worry. But now they just worry about who's paying who how much money.
That's right.
But in those days, it was the off-season sport. Discussing baseball.
Let's go back to your kind of childhood and family and so on. You were not an only child, right?
No, I had an older sister and an older brother. And I guess I can get to the point of how I got involved in baseball. I followed it like every other kid in New York, most kids. But when I was 11 years old, my brother, who was 3 or 4 years older, died suddenly of an operation, appendicitis, which was poorly diagnosed. And then the next year, my mother died of cancer.
Oh boy.
So my love for baseball, looking back on it, is not only that I like the game anyhow, but I think it was sort of a substitute for things I wanted, looking back. In retrospect, and that's how I got into it. And over the years, most people realized, look, this is a great game for kids, but I have to earn a living now. Well, I earned a living, but I kept following baseball, and eventually I got involved with a group now called the Society for American Baseball Research, SABR, S-A-B-R.
S-A-B-R, Society
for American Baseball Research.
Okay.
And these guys are crazy. I mean, they range anywhere from the former Governor Thornburg to the lowliest shipping clerk in Manhattan.
Okay.
And they united by their love for the game. But some of the things they follow are beyond me. For example, I like the statistics
You like statistics.
Well, as applied to baseball, yeah. And it's a beautiful medium because of such a universe, so much data to be analyzed, and trends and whatnot. And I like following the games themselves on TV, which is really better in a way than going to the game.
Right, right. Somebody said, "Well, are you going to watch the Wizards?"
See, she doesn't know this game either.
I do too. My brother played baseball, and he always used to come home with a bad thumb because he was the catcher, and they were always killing his thumb.
They used to call that the tools of ignorance, the catcher.
Oh, the tools of it.
Not that I'm calling your brother ignorant.
He is deceased, so I won't share with him.
Speak ill of the dead. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
But in addition to these more ordinary things, and to follow like statistics, games, players, some of these fellows are interested in where ball players are buried. This is a little bizarre, and it's not my thing. And I also was never a big autograph collector. But right now I'm involved with these fellows on I was one of the originals, and I follow their activities, but I don't go to all their meetings anymore.
This is the research group.
The Society for American Baseball Research.
But it did give you an in to help you look at broader aspects of the whole sport.
And the area I'm interested in, of course, involved these books.
Okay.
Because baseball is a perfect medium for literature.
Oh.
It really is. It's the sport that really started with the country, not with the country, but the 1840s. And the old days when we were a rural country, and the kids playing ball in the field, that kind of thing. And it was the game, as I said before, until World War II. And now it's just another one of the games because it's too slow for the American people. They want to see 300-pound guys crashing in football, or 7-foot centers running up and down the court in basketball, who are wonderful athletes, by the way.
Oh, they have to be.
So baseball is just another game. It'll always be around, at least in our lifetimes.
I don't know. Remind me, and you said you were not an autograph seeker, but I'm inclined to watch on the TV the Antique Roadshow.
That's different, yeah.
Yeah, but the point I was leading to was last night. This person had brought in 2 baseballs that had been signed
by the senators,
by famous people in baseball.
Yes.
And I think those baseballs were estimated for about $2,000 a piece.
Oh yes.
So it's interesting. Let me go back to something again. You were born and raised in Manhattan.
Well, the Bronx originally.
The Bronx, and
yes.
New York. I meant New York City.
Yeah.
Am I not correct that as of now, even way back, New York City was a baseball city?
Oh yes.
That is partly where you.
The original players, the teams, the game started in the 1840s and 50s, in very rudimentary fashion. And it started in Brooklyn, New York, and it spread to the Northeast, basically. It was a Northeastern game. And there was, by the way, there's a discussion, is it derived from Rounders, a British game, or was it purely an American invention? They don't know. It really is an American.
That research group is looking at that question. That's interesting.
Right. And it's, by the way, I meant to say, some of these fellows in the research group follow last night's game, and then in the next breath they'll talk about who is this guy that played in 1890 and we can't find his record, let's look into it. I mean, they're off the wall, but they're good guys.
Okay, I want to swing back because I expect it's not unexpected that you tend to slip right into baseball for discussion, which is why we're here, of course. Not the only reason. Because there was another side to Fred Stein, right?
I guess.
Well, you guess. See,
no one thinks so, but go ahead.
Well, that's why I'm gonna lead you into sharing some of it, because World War II came along.
Right.
And you were in the military.
All 119 pounds in the infantry.
119 pounds.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me interject a story.
I'm listening.
I was taking basic training in Camp Wheeler, Georgia, near Macon, Georgia.
Okay.
And my father came down to visit. He happened to know a fellow who worked in the company. He inveigled his way in there. And one day he managed to have lunch with us. We were taking basic training. We came in for lunch. And then after lunch, we had to go out and do maneuvers. So here I am, 119 pounds of me, wearing this helmet. Well, there's a liner under the helmet, and then the heavy helmet. So here, my father told me this after the war. He said, I watched you walk out there with these other guys in formation. And he says, you look so fragile that I said to my friend who was sitting with him, he said, I'm going to go home now and cash in all my war bonds. We can't win this thing with guys like that.
Oh, Lord, you didn't tell me that one before.
Well, I know. I keep these secrets. Actually, he told me that when I came out of the Army. But I saw quite a bit of combat. And I, who couldn't stand the fireworks on July 4th, they were too noisy, got in the very thick of it.
Did you change then?
No, I still hate it.
You still hate fireworks?
I honor the 4th, but I don't like the fireworks. Too noisy.
Okay. Well, so you, like many of our residents, and myself included, took advantage of the GI Bill.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, go ahead and take me on that route.
Well,
what happened?
Well, it was magnificent legislation because look at what it did for the country. No, I came out of the Army in 1946, and I went to Penn State. I had been there 1 year before I went in service. And with the courtesy of the GI Bill, I managed 3 years and finished at Penn State. I studied dairy technology.
Dairy?
Dairy technology.
Like cows, milk, dairy.
Well, the cows produce the raw product, milk.
Yes.
But then they process it, and I was involved with the processing of it.
You were involved with the processing.
Well, I worked for a few plants, you know, and unfortunately didn't fall into the vats.
Well, see, I was on the other end of that, Fred. My parents were farmers, so I produced it, and
we used
did something with it.
But what I did was I studied dairy technology. Then I got my master's from Ohio State. The bachelor's was from Penn State. Got my master's at Ohio State in dairy marketing.
Dairy marketing.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more.
Well, it's very complex. Originally, the farmers used to have these milk cans you see on the side of the road.
Oh yes. Tell me about it.
And they were at the mercy of the plants. In other words, the plants had an attitude of, okay, bring it in, take it or leave it, and the plants measure the milk in terms of the butterfat content and the volume delivered, quantity. And then the farmers, to fight back, developed their
Dairymen's League Association.
Dairymen's League, yeah.
Oh, I helped serve dinner to that group many a time.
Well, they were the big ones in New York. And then the farmers' groups became so big, they realized that milk was so interstate, not involving one small area, but that the federal government stepped in and took some. What they did was they set the minimum price that the milk plants had to pay the farmers. They could pay more, but not less. And then they got involved, the federal government, in making sure that the butterfat test was correct and the volume was correct, and that's where I came in. I went to work at the USDA here in town in Washington, and because I had the dairy technology background. And that's how I got into that.
Yeah. So what, with the federal government, what did you do? What you were with?
Well, I went with an organization, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and they had the job of handling.
Surely.
Some of them, of course, got into research and that, but I was not in that dairy research. I was involved with the marketing end.
The marketing. Where
the government, in effect, strengthened the position of the co-ops, cooperatives, like Dairymen's League, in terms of their bargaining with plants. Again, the milk plants, originally the big milk companies didn't like the government coming in and telling them what to do. But then the big plants started to realize, wait a minute, this equalizes the cost of milk, and we're in a better position than the small milk companies. So it's very complex. And I don't even know what they're doing today, but the field has changed. Like I mentioned, the milk cans along the country road, they don't exist anymore. Now the farmers are bigger and wealthier, or at least have more money. I don't know how wealthy they are. And they have a milk plant in their milk house, a tank in their milk house that's refrigerated. So the tanker pulls up to the plant, pumps the milk in, and there are no cans. But the effect of this is that with milk cans, you used to have to have them picked up dumped into the tank of the plant and then returned to you. Now the milk is mobile itself. So it's changed the whole structure.
Well, that has changed the possibility of safety, higher safety features.
Well, actually, hopefully the the safety, it's like the airlines, even if they cut costs, they're supposed to maintain their safety levels, and the same thing applies to milk and food products like that.
I know, but it seems to me as though that there is less chance for disease.
Oh yeah, well,
in this, in contrast,
right.
because those cans had to be clean,
right,
and sterilized,
and they could not be kept at the 38 degrees or so that the milk can be kept in these tanks. That's right.
Of course.
So you are right. That's
course.
a good point. Yeah.
Okay. So, again, you were in the marketing end.
Yes.
For the with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. What did you do? And you know, what kinds of things did you do?
What I did was to go out in the field and work with the dairy cooperatives in their testing programs.
Okay.
And it was the kind of thing that I had a special angle because all the guys worked on the pricing of milk, and I was in the technical side. And I was doing this until all of a sudden one day in 1966, Senator Muskie came to the Department of Agriculture and talked about water pollution control, which was just coming to the fore then. And I became interested. I realized that my possibilities, the dairy side, were going to be limited in terms of moving up. So I got involved with water pollution control.
Water pollution control.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was an agency that was then, I think, is in the Interior Department. But eventually it became an independent agency and then got folded into the EPA as the water component. EPA now includes solid waste, air, hazardous substances, the works. And when I got in 1968, before I got that, I was in charge of a project called the Cost of Clean Water Project. That was the original project to estimate what it would cost to clean up the nation's waterways. And of course, we estimated at $24 billion, which I'm sure today would clean up a couple of drops of water.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
But I did that for a while, and I stayed with that, and I went over to the Commerce Department, and there was an interesting job I got there. They passed legislation which created something called the Federal Industrial Pollution Control Council. And the job was, industry had to recognize that it was creating some pollution problems. How were they to be solved? And this was a political as well as a practical means of getting the information from the industries as to how they thought this should be done. And the job, the product were a bunch of booklets, and I worked with 3 other fellows, other executive secretaries, and writing these and editing them and so forth. And eventually the council came to disappeared because it happened in 1972 when Watergate hove on the scene.
Watergate.
Well, these were great, these meetings, because my boss was the head of our council, and he would regale the big businessmen and people like Iacocca. The top dogs of industry came in, and he would regale them with stories about what was going on in the government, and they listened with ears, and the theory being they would support the administration. Well, then came Watergate, and that was it.
The bubble burst.
The bubble burst. So I hung around for 5-6 years and then retired in the same kind of, well, I worked on environmental impact statements, which is a fate worse than death. I mean, these are.
You must have some very interesting attitude, feelings about what's going on in relation to pollution at this time in history.
I did, yeah. It's the evolution of it is this way, came this way. When I got involved with the EPA originally, there are 3 fields of concern were water pollution, air pollution, and solid waste. But then came things like hazardous substances, things which were much more exotic than the 3 basic fields of concern. And now I have no idea what they're doing, except I know that
Surely.
they're taking a beating, you know.
Sure.
Political.
What I'm thinking as you're talking, you were writing speeches, you were writing reports. I mean, what has hit me between the eyes, you were writing.
Oh, yes. When I was young, my aunt, who was in business and who knew a lot, and my father talked me out of becoming a journalist. So the result was I studied a field like dairy technology, and there were a lot of electives in it, so I did get some writing. But basically, I'm sort of a frustrated writer. So I did my first book in 1979, just before I retired from the government.
Oh, my.
And I think I told you about the nom de plume business, did I not?
Right now.
What that is I used to write speeches for my boss in agriculture. And of course you clear those through the department, information service. And then I started doing my own speeches, my own articles, and clearing them. But one day it occurred to me, why can't I do these on a nom de plume basis? In other words, write them under an assumed name and therefore take the USDA out of the field. So I started writing articles on technology subjects, and my older son's name is Daniel, and my father was Edward, so they were under the name Daniel Edwards. And then when I started to write on dairy economics as compared to dairy technology, I used to write these for trade magazines, and my editor said, well, all right, why don't you do some economics work, but let's give it a different name. I said, what do you think? He says, David Lewis would be just fine. But the one other point I think I may have mentioned to you about the writing, these writings were done, of course, over and above my work as a federal employee. So I wrote my first my first article in 1957, and I got $75 for that. I was so proud.
Sure.
And as my friends know, I'm monumentally unhandy. I can barely turn on a faucet. So about that time, our shower started dripped. And I said, well, I can fix it. You just change the washer. Isn't that all it is? By the time I got through, we were talking about a small version of Mount Vesuvius. This thing was black gunk. So I took the $75 and I paid a plumber $75 to fix it. So I learned a lesson: stick with what you can do well and stay away from things that can be injurious to your health.
No matter how you define health.
Right.
That's great. That's great. But it does bring us back to the books, which is the fascinating part. All right, so you wrote the first one quite some time ago, but you hadn't given up on writing. What do you think prompted the content, the focus of your second book? Well, let's talk about the first book.
Well,
What's the focus?
All right. Well, first of all, I'd written several before I came into these. These three were written by my current publisher.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt right here because we're talking about three pictures, which I think we've shown, and we'll show again, the three books. And these, let's use this time right now to say, these are in the library.
Right here, on the author's shelf.
On the author's shelf.
Right.
So these three books on baseball that we're talking about now
Yes.
are basically housed in the library.
Available to people who live here.
Right. And, of course, we know that those authors' books cannot be removed from the library.
Right.
Except you, the author who owns them, could bring them here for us to show.
Correct.
That's the only way they...
That's right.
Okay, all right. Now back to your first book. Now we've got the book culture, helped residents see it.
Okay. Well, the first book is about Mel Ott, a New York Giants star when I was growing up, my favorite player. And that was published in 1999. The second book is about the player-manager. Nowadays, there's no such thing in the major leagues as a player managing while he's playing. It's too much to expect.
Oh, yes.
In those days, for economic reasons, they wanted a guy to do two jobs, to be a player and a manager.
So that's what that second book is about.
Called, and the skipper bats cleanup, and the skipper means the manager, and he bats cleanup and plays while he manages. And the most recent one is the one on the history of the baseball fan.
Yeah, that's clever. Now the history of the baseball fan. That's up on the scroll now, so you can see and hear what we're talking about. What got you started on that one, Fred?
Well, I'll tell you, I reached the point where my knowledge of baseball was, I can't write about something I don't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew about that, and that's why now I'm doing my memoirs.
Ah, okay.
But the point is that was done because I thought I had a clever idea. All these books about players, this would be a book about the fan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out we got this book out, but before we did, it turns out there was another book similar to it, which I wasn't aware of, which had been published 6 months before.
Uh-oh.
But this book is informal, and I would think to a lot of women particularly, but a lot of people who don't care about baseball, their eyes must glaze over at these subjects.
Uh-huh.
So I tried to make it interesting to the the person who doesn't care about baseball. Maybe he gets something out of it. And the history of baseball includes one chapter of my involvement in it on the first-person singular level. And the rest of the subject is who are the popular players, who are some of the interesting fans, and how fans have influenced the game itself and the way it's played, that sort of thing.
In the earlier years, what do I want to say, 25 years ago, or maybe even 50.
Yeah.
Besides New York, which everybody, I think, would quickly say, oh yes, New York was one of the starting baseball cities.
Yes.
Right? What other cities?
Well, it's extended everywhere. In Boston, it's a religion.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
And in California, the Dodgers, the Hollywood influence is out there. The real rabid fans also are in the Midwest, in St. Louis and Chicago. Chicago Cubs or the Cubbies, that adorable name. And so you have baseball is caught on in the Midwest very much too.
Well, now you left out one that I kind of thought you'd say Atlanta, Georgia.
Well, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, but
well,
see, this is it.
But
so I was
an interesting thing is that when you talk about Atlanta, then your mind wanders down to Florida, and those teams have not done well financially, I don't think, because of the heat. And for some reason, the people, maybe there's more to do outside down there and in the summer. I don't know.
Oh, golf.
Well, golf. Well, that's universal.
Well, I know, but you can't do it universally.
Yeah.
I mean, people from New York State have to fly to Florida to play golf in the wintertime.
Well, certainly. But what I think is interesting about baseball, among other things, is that we live in an age where it's instant gratification, instant thrill. Football, there's a sensational play, and before people can even think about it, there's another sensational play. And basketball is somewhat the same way. But baseball is a game of it goes along evenly, then it rises to a certain level, then drops down. The team either scores or they don't. And the result is that there's a great play in there, you have time to think about it. So it's a contemplative thing. You think about it. So I find baseball psychologically, it had been better attuned to the earlier America, no question.
There's a point that I think we want to make here. Where did you write the third book? Where were you? Second
and third books were written while I was a resident here. I love saying that because
well, that's why
it means there's life in the old boys and girls yet.
The second two books were both written after you moved to Green Spring Village.
Correct.
Okay, see, we can all do our things. He kind of stayed put in his apartment. That's why probably a lot of people don't know you.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm on the road a lot too.
Yeah. Well, we don't need to tell your personal love life.
Don't go into that.
It was baseball you were after.
Right.
But
one thing I could say though about the Mel Ott book, for example, when I was a kid, I had a scrapbook about him, like a lot of kids did. And everything in that book was written from material within the confines of my library at home, my own books, except for one thing that happened in World War II when I was away out of the country. I had to check the newspaper for that, but the rest is all. I like the thought of taking all that material and putting it into a concise, succinct version of description, as these books are.
Okay. I'll bet some residents are out there saying, Marcia, when are you going to ask him about the Nationals? Why aren't you talking to him about the Nationals? So I'm talking to you now about the Nationals, you know.
Well, the Nationals will rise when they get the right manager and they have the right amount of money, and if they have people who can run it, who know how to run a team, who can really run a team, that's when they'll do better.
Is it your candid judgment, Fred Stein, that the powers that be now running the Nationals have in fact those abilities in their manager and top manager and so on?
Well, when they pick the manager, but you realize in baseball, the man who runs the team is just a cog. It's the general managers, it's the business end, it's how they spend their money, how wisely they spend it.
Okay, my question is, do you have the feeling that there are the right abilities in those slots for our Nationals?
The early signs. Stan Kasten, who runs the team, came from Atlanta, and he helped build the success they've had down there. So hopefully that's all we can tell, though.
Okay, but let's remind residents, you heard it first on Channel 6, okay? You heard it first. Fred Stein, our baseball expert, says the Nationals have the potential to be a great team.
Potential.
That's what I said, potential.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I said, too. That's it.
Okay. Fred Stein, it's been fun, and who knows, we may have to have you back in baseball season, but, you know, it's Christmas time and getting there and all those kinds of things. But we do thank you for sharing,
My
and what
pleasure.
an interesting story. Wrote 2 books since he's been here on baseball. I think he's a baseball fanatic. Okay, I'm gonna make you that. All right, we thank him for being here. We thank you for being here. And now let's look at the future. Not too far in the future, because today, Tuesday at 2 o'clock, Dr. Janice Gable, there will be a repeated, you know, a record video of her talk some time ago about coping with change, something each and every resident, I'm certain, is doing. And then this program will be repeated Thursday at 8 p.m. So if you don't get to see it today, tune in Thursday. Now we're going to talk about tomorrow on Village in Motion, and we have the holiday safety tips with the Fairfax County Police. That should be very interesting. So let's tune in tomorrow for that, along with the special trips with our Erica Cartwright, our special trips manager. So with that, we say thank you again. Do have a good day.